I woke to the sound of a plastic cup tapping against porcelain, and a voice saying the words "comfort only." For a moment I thought it was a dream, one of those thin floating kinds where your body feels too light to belong to you. Then I opened my eyes and saw the hospice badge pinned to a stranger's chest. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button. Also, tell us in the comments, what time is it where you are right now and which city are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. The woman's hands were gentle, practiced. She smiled like someone who'd done this 100 times before, the kind of smile that could talk you into believing the end was something merciful. In her gloved palm rested 2 pills, white, unmarked, sitting like little ghosts. "I'm here to make sure you're comfortable," she said softly. I blinked once, then again trying to clear the fog. My chest was heavy, not from pain but from confusion. Comfortable? Hospice? The last thing I remembered was sitting in my recliner reading the paper, my coffee cooling beside me. I wasn't dying. At least I hadn't been. Then I heard her voice. The one that truly woke me, my daughter-in-law. She was standing just behind the hospice worker, whispering, "It's all set. Just keep him calm. We don't want him agitated." Something in her tone cut through the haze. It wasn't grief. It was efficiency. And when she reached over to adjust the blanket at my chest, her fingers trembled. Not with sorrow, but with nerves. I stared at the pills. "What are those?" I managed. "Just your evening medication," she said. "Same as always." But they weren't. My regular ones were amber capsules with faint blue lines. I'd been taking them for years. These were different, too clean, too new. I took the cup of water she offered, lifted the pills to my lips, and didn't swallow. I let them rest against my tongue just long enough to nod to make it believable. When she turned to check the monitor on the wall, I spit them into my palm and slid them beneath the sheet. They felt powdery, fragile. I closed my hand until they cracked slightly, then hid the crumbs inside my fist. The hospice worker smiled again, unaware. "He's compliant," she said quietly. "That's good. Compliant." The word echoed like a curse. They left soon after. The front door clicked shut and their voices melted into the distant hum of the street outside. Only then did I sit up, slow and deliberate. The room swayed a little, not from the drug but from the rush of realization. I wasn't on hospice care. I hadn't signed anything. So who had? I walked to the sink, opened my hand, and let the crushed powder fall into a square of aluminum foil from the kitchen drawer. Folded it twice tight. My hands were shaking, but my mind had already gone cold. Something had been switched. My pills, my paperwork, maybe my fate. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds like it didn't know what happened. I made coffee, the kind that burns the first sip, and called the VA clinic. I asked for the pharmacist who'd helped me last winter when my dosage was off. She remembered me, said she could fit me in at 2 o'clock if I could make it. "I can," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Before leaving, I walked through every room in the house. My wife's old crocheted blanket still lay folded over the armchair. Her picture on the mantel watched me with that patient kindness she never lost. "I'm all right," I whispered to her face in the frame. "Just a little test to run." When I reached the hallway, I saw it, the new clipboard hanging on a hook near the door. Hospice intake packet, printed neat at the top, my name underneath and a box checked in bold ink, DNR, do not resuscitate. I touched the paper like it might burn. My signature was there, shaky, uneven, but not mine. The curve of the E was wrong, too round, too clean. Someone had practiced. I folded the page and slid it into my coat pocket. At the clinic, the pharmacist, a woman named Torres, squinted at the foil when I placed it on her counter. You didn't take these? No. Something felt off. She cut one of the pieces open, scraped a few flecks into a small vial, and ran it under a handheld scanner. Her eyebrows pulled together. This isn't metoprolol. It's got sedative traces, midazolam, maybe more. Who gave you these? I told her. Everything. The hospice visit, the whisper, the false DNR. She didn't blink. She'd seen things, I could tell. You need to file an incident report, she said quietly, and call your primary doctor today. I'll mark this for testing. When I stepped back outside, the air felt raw. The wind off the sound carried that metallic chill that comes right before rain. I stood there for a while, staring at the boats rocking in the harbor. Every creak of rope, every clink of metal against mast felt like an alarm bell in some other language, one only sailors and old men can hear. By evening, I was back home alone. The quiet felt strange now, too heavy, too deliberate. I kept thinking about the way she'd said it's all set, the certainty in it. What was all set? The meds, the paperwork, the inheritance. I dug through the kitchen drawer for the file I kept of old statements. Bank, insurance, property tax, the boring paper life of a man who likes order. Nothing seemed out of place until I reached the letter from my bank. It was dated 3 days ago. This is to confirm the addition of an authorized agent to your primary account. Agent. The letter named my daughter-in-law. My pulse thudded once, hard enough to make my fingers tremble. I looked again, tracing the faint pen strokes of the signature beneath. Mine? Or rather, someone's version of it. It hit me then. This wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a design. I folded the letter back into its envelope, then walked to my workbench in the garage, pulled out the small gray notebook I used to keep electrical diagrams. I opened it to a blank page and wrote in neat block letters, Log, October 3rd. Pill substitution confirmed. Unauthorized DNR found. Bank signature forged. Suspect, daughter-in-law, motive unknown. I underlined it once the way I used to underline coordinates on a wiring map. That night I didn't sleep in my bed. I pulled the recliner close to the front window, left the porch light on, and listened to the rain start tapping against the glass. The old habits came back. That quiet vigilance I'd learned on ships where you listen for what's missing, not just what's there. Somewhere past midnight, headlights swept across the blinds. Her car. She paused in the driveway for a long moment before backing out again. By morning, I had my plan. I'd play along, act weaker, slower, maybe even grateful. Let her think she'd won. Meanwhile, I'd record everything, dates, names, words. I'd rebuild my life on paper, line by line, proof by proof. Because when someone tries to switch your fate, you don't fight loud, you fight true. And I wasn't done yet. Morning came gray and brittle, the kind of light that doesn't warm anything. It just shows you what's been left behind. I stood by the window with my mug, watching mist crawl across the water. The harbor gulls moved in slow, heavy arcs. Patient, deliberate, like they knew something I didn't. The cup trembled slightly in my hand, not from age, but from restraint. The urge to storm over to my son's house and demand the truth clawed at me like a live wire. But that wasn't the way. Not now. Not yet. Instead, I took a long breath and opened my notebook again. Each line I wrote steadied me. Dates, names, times, patterns. I'd learned in the Navy that chaos only wins when you stop keeping records. At 9:12 a.m., I called the bank. Spoke to a woman named Ellen who'd handled my accounts for years. I need to verify something, I said. There was an agent added recently. Can you confirm who authorized it? There was a pause, a faint tapping of keys. Then her voice dropped half a tone. It says the request came from you, Mr. Morgan. In person. We scanned your ID and signature. In person? I repeated. When was that? September 30th. branch location on Water Street. I hadn't set foot in that branch since July. She hesitated. Was that not you? No, Ellen, it wasn't. Silence stretched. I'll flag the file for internal review, she said finally. And I'll send you the copies we have on record. Please do, I said. And Ellen, don't mention this call to anyone. Her breath caught, then steadied. Understood. When I hung up, I sat for a long time staring at the phone. There's a moment in every repair job when you realize the short circuit isn't in the wires. It's in the people who handled them. That's when you stop patching and start rewiring from scratch. I called the VA again next. Asked if they had any record of a hospice referral under my name. The clerk checked. You were listed for palliative intake, she said. Referral submitted by family. Which family member? Your daughter-in-law. She's on your emergency contact form. My throat tightened. You can remove her from that, I said. Effective immediately. Understood, sir. By noon, I was walking down Main Street, jacket zipped up against the chill. The harbor smelled of diesel and wet rope. I passed the bakery, the post office, the tiny law office tucked between a bait shop and a real estate agency. The sign on the window read, Elder Law and Trusts, John H. Carver, Esq. I pushed the door open. The office was warm, filled with the faint hum of an air purifier and the low tick of a clock. A younger woman looked up from the front desk. Mr. Morgan? Yes, I said. I need to talk to someone about power of attorney fraud. Her eyes sharpened instantly. Right this way. Carver looked maybe mid-40s, sleeves rolled, expression clear. He gestured to the chair across from him. Tell me what's going on. I told him everything. The hospice intake, the forged DNR, the altered meds, the forged bank signature. He didn't interrupt, just listened. Pen poised above a yellow pad, eyes steady. When I finished, he leaned back. You've got overlapping issues here. Medical coercion, financial exploitation, and likely forgery. The good news is we can lock this down fast if you act before they realize you know. He started listing steps like a man tracing a wire map. First, revoke any existing powers of attorney, financial or medical. File new documents witnessed and notarized naming a neutral party. Second, move your primary assets into a revocable living trust under your own control. Third, get an injunction freezing major account changes until verification. I nodded slowly. And what about evidence? Keep every scrap, he said. Bank letters, pill samples, emails, timestamps. If you can, start recording any conversations at home. Discreetly but legally. His voice softened then. Mr. Morgan, this happens more than people think. They count on you being tired, confused, too polite to question paperwork. You're already ahead of the curve. I looked at him for a long moment. I spent 40 years wiring ships that could run for months without a spark out of place. I know what happens when you trust the wrong connection. He smiled faintly. Then you'll do fine. He drew up the revocation forms while I waited. Signed, witnessed, sealed, all within an hour. When I left, the wind had shifted, colder now, with a hint of salt spray that stung the eyes. At the pharmacy, Torres had my results, ready. You were right, she said. Midazolam and traces of zolpidem. Enough to sedate an adult for several hours? Would that have interacted with my heart medication? It could have slowed your breathing, she said carefully. In someone your age. Dangerous. She slid the small evidence envelope across the counter. Keep this sealed. Chain of custody labeled. Time-stamped. If anyone asks, you hand it straight to the investigator. I thanked her, tucking it inside my coat. Back home, the house looked ordinary again. Sunlight slanting through the blinds, kettle whistling, the smell of pine cleaner. but I could feel it. The quiet wrongness under the surface, like a hum you can only hear when everything else stops. At 4, my son came by, unannounced. "Hey, Dad," he said, stepping inside. "Just checking on you. Heard you weren't feeling great." I studied him. He looked tired, distracted, the way a man looks when he's balancing someone else's story on his shoulders. "I'm fine," I said evenly. "Feeling better already?" He nodded, glancing around. "She said hospice was helping." I told her that sounded premature. "She was trying to help," I said, "in her own way." He smiled faintly, relieved at what he thought was forgiveness. I poured us both coffee. We sat across the table, the ticking of the kitchen clock filling the pauses. I watched the way he gripped the mug, his thumb tapping the rim, the same rhythm I used to drum when I was hiding nerves. "She's been handling a lot," he said quietly. "Bills, groceries, paperwork." "I know," I said. I don't want there to be tension. She worries about you." I looked at him over the rim of my cup. "She should," I said softly. He blinked, unsure how to take it. When he left, I waited until his car disappeared down the street, then opened my notebook again. Wrote, October 4th, visit from son, defensive posture, possible ignorance or divided loyalty, maintain calm, collect more data. I closed the book, set it beside the lamp and stared at the last line until the ink dried. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks of the old window frame. The sound reminded me of a low electric hum, the kind you hear just before something burns out. Except this time, I wasn't the circuit in danger. I was the man holding the pliers. And I was just getting started. The first rule of wiring: never patch what's already corroded. Strip it back. Start fresh. That became my rule for everything after the visit from my son. The following morning, I stood at my kitchen counter with the newspaper spread open and a cup of coffee going cold beside me. The tide was high, the gulls screaming outside like they were arguing about who got the next scrap. I didn't read a word of the news. My eyes kept drifting to the small gray notebook beside the salt shaker. My new circuit map, my log of what they thought would never be traced. I'd spent half the night making copies. Bank letter, DNR form, the pill report from Torres, even the revocation documents from the attorney. Everything labeled, sealed, dated. There's a quiet comfort in order. The kind of calm only a man who's wired a breaker panel in a storm would understand. I set up a hidden camera that morning, a small lens tucked inside the corner shelf above the kitchen counter. The motion light blinked twice, steady. It wasn't fear driving me anymore. It was precision. By mid-morning, my phone rang. Caller ID, my daughter-in-law. I let it go to voicemail. The message was sweet, bright, almost musical. "Just checking in, Dad. Wanted to drop by and bring you some groceries later. Thought maybe we could talk about the will paperwork you've been avoiding. Love you." I stood there listening to it twice. The casual mention of will paperwork made my jaw tighten. When she arrived that afternoon, the sun was cutting through the blinds in sharp lines. She came in like always. A little too cheerful, too careful with her tone. A bag of groceries in one arm, her phone in the other. "Thought you could use some fresh stuff," she said, setting the bag down. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I said, "much better." "That's wonderful," she smiled. "See? Hospice is helping." I nodded. "Yes, though they seem to think I'm a lot closer to the end than I do." She froze for half a heartbeat, then laughed softly. "Oh, they just like to be prepared." Prepared. I noted the word. She opened the fridge and began unloading groceries. Yogurt, milk, eggs, a package of pills neatly tucked in a brown paper bag marked with a pharmacy logo. "Doctor adjusted your prescription," she said without turning. "Lower dose now." I stepped closer. "Which doctor was that?" Oh, the new one from hospice. I see, I said quietly, because my primary says otherwise. Her shoulders stiffened just enough for me to catch it. I smiled, slow and steady. I'll hang on to these until I double-check. She turned, that perfect smile returning. Of course, whatever makes you comfortable. When she left, I closed the door softly behind her and slid the bag into a locked drawer. Then I opened my notebook again. October 6th. New pills delivered. Suspect nervous under mild questioning. Body language, avoidance, maintain calm, collect footage. That evening I drove to the attorney's office again. Carver had arranged a private notary. Someone with no connection to the family. We finalized the trust transfer and moved my savings into the new account under its name. The Morgan Maritime Fund. Simple and airtight, Carver said, sliding the last page toward me. You're the sole trustee and beneficiary during your lifetime, after the scholarship foundation takes over. Can she touch it? I asked. Not a cent, he said. Even if she finds out about it, the transfer predates any challenge. You're protected. I signed, my hand steady this time. Then we're done patching, I said. Now we start rewiring. That night I went home through the harbor roads where the fog rolls in thick and quiet, softening the edges of everything. The boat lights blinked like patient eyes. It reminded me of the nights I'd spent wiring deck lights decades ago. Cold fingers, salt wind, and that strange satisfaction when the circuit finally held. Back home, I called my son. Hey, he answered, voice wary. I was thinking, I said evenly, it might be good if we took a little space, let things settle. I've got some medical appointments to handle myself. He hesitated. She was only trying to help, Dad. I know, I said softly, and I'm only trying to live. The silence that followed felt like a cable stretched too tight, one spark away from snapping. Okay, he said finally, whatever you need. Tell her I appreciate the groceries, I said, and not to worry about hospice anymore, they won't be coming back. When I hung up, the air in the house felt lighter, like a circuit had been severed cleanly. I spent the next few days in quiet rhythm. Morning walks by the docks, lunches alone at the diner, evenings with my notebook, my log growing thicker by the day. I began to see the pattern emerging, pharmacy changes, bank visits, notary signatures. Each one like a knot on a rope leading back to her brother, the notary public who handled emergency signings for hospice families. One evening I looked up his license on the state website. There it was, his name, his commission ID, and an address not far from the pharmacy Torres had flagged. I printed the record, circled it in red, and added it to the file. By then I'd stopped feeling afraid. Fear had been replaced by clarity. Every day the plan grew sharper, the lines straighter. I was no longer the old man who almost swallowed a stranger's pill. I was the man drawing the new map of consequence. That weekend, I took down the framed photo of my wife from the mantel and set it on my desk. Her eyes, that calm steadiness she always had, looked right through me. You'd tell me to be kind, I whispered, but you'd also tell me to be smart. The sea wind rattled the window pane just then like an answer. I picked up the notebook and wrote one final line for the night. October 10th. Trust completed. New allies secured. Next step, confirm notary connection. Then I closed it, turned off the light, and sat in the dark for a long moment. The house creaked softly around me, old wood settling, wires humming faintly in the walls. Everything that mattered was rewired now. Not just the paperwork, but me. And somewhere in that darkness I realized something else. She still thought I was compliant. Good. That was going to make the next part easier. The days grew shorter, colder, the kind of weather that makes a man take stock of what's still alive inside him. Out on the water, the masts clicked against one another in the wind, sounding like old bones keeping time. I liked that sound. It reminded me that even the brittle things still make music if you listen right. I spent most mornings in silence, logging every call, every visit. Routine is how you stay sane when you're surrounded by deceit. Routine and patience. On the 12th day since the pills, she came back. No warning this time. Just a soft knock and the door easing open like she owned the air inside. She carried a paper bag again. Not groceries this time, but the same pharmacy logo I'd come to recognize. Her perfume hit before her words did. "I thought we could try a different brand," she said lightly, setting the bag on the counter. "The doctor said it might help you rest better." I looked at her hands. No tremor, no hesitation. She'd rehearsed this. "That's thoughtful of you," I said. "Why don't you put them right there?" She smiled, unbothered. "You trust me again?" "I'm trying," I said. "It's hard to do much else when you're old and tired." Her eyes softened, just slightly. "You've always been so strong. I just want to make sure you're comfortable." There it was again. Comfortable. The word they use when they want you quiet. I watched her leave, waited until her car disappeared down the street, and then opened the bag. Inside were 2 small orange bottles, sealed, both labeled with my name in perfect print. Except, the refill dates didn't match my VA chart. The dosage was higher. I snapped a photo with my phone, date and time visible, then slid the bottles into an envelope marked for Torres. That night I met her at the clinic's back entrance after hours. She wore her hair pulled up and carried a small testing kit like a detective with a scalpel. "Let's see what she's playing with this time," she said quietly. We cracked the seal, scraped a sample, and waited. The strip shifted color slowly, blue fading to gray. Torres frowned. "Barbiturate traces, mixed with antihistamines to mask the odor. Dangerous in combination." I exhaled through my teeth. "So the plan was to make me sleep, then let nature take the blame." She nodded grimly. "You're lucky you didn't take it." "Luck had nothing to do with it," I said. "She's consistent. That's her mistake." Torres looked at me, eyes narrowing with something like admiration. "You've got an investigator's patience." "No," I said. "Just an old man's memory for patterns." The next morning I called Carver. "Time to loop in someone else," I said. "Adult Protective Services. I'll provide documentation." He didn't argue. We met that afternoon in his office, and I laid everything out. Photos, pharmacy tests, bank letters, recordings, transcripts. He reviewed it all quietly, no theatrics. Just that calm, legal rhythm of a man building a wall 1 brick at a time. When we finished, he leaned back. "I'll file the protective petition today. Once APS receives it, they'll open a formal case. You'll need to give a statement to the investigator." "I can do that," I said. He hesitated. "Are you prepared for what happens next? This could end with criminal charges. Against your daughter-in-law, maybe your son." My throat tightened. "Prepared isn't the same as ready," I said. "But yes, I am." That evening I got a call from a woman named Melanie, APS investigator. Her tone was professional, almost kind. "We received the petition, Mr. Morgan. I'll need to visit in person to document your statement and secure any evidence." "Tomorrow morning works," I said. When she arrived, she wasn't what I expected. Mid-40s, steady eyes, the kind that see more than you say. She set her recorder down and began gently. "You're sure about the source of these pills?" "Positive," I said. "I watched her set them on that counter, twice now." Melanie nodded. "We'll contact the pharmacy and cross-check prescription records. If any were altered, it'll show." Then she flipped open her folder. You mentioned a hospice nurse. Yes, I said. She was here that first night, looked uneasy, but she followed orders. Do you remember her name? I did, and I gave it. That name opened the first door. Within 2 days, Melanie called back, voice sharper now, excitement beneath the control. The nurse confirmed your story. She said your daughter-in-law offered her a donation to keep you under sedation and sign off on comfort-only care. A long pause filled the line. She refused, of course, reported it to her supervisor, but the supervisor never filed the incident. That's being reviewed too. I closed my eyes, letting the air out slow. So it's real. All of it. It's real, she said. And it's criminal. She asked if I'd be willing to testify if charges were filed. I said yes. My voice didn't shake when I said it. That night I sat on the porch with the sea wind brushing through the pines. The lights of the harbor blinked in and out behind the fog. I thought of my son. How he hadn't called since that last talk. Maybe he knew. Maybe he was pretending not to. There's a special kind of silence that lives between knowing and admitting. It hums like an ungrounded wire. Around 9, a car pulled into the driveway. Her car. I didn't move, just watched through the screen door as she stepped out, wrapped in that same coat. Moving slow, careful. She didn't come to the door. Instead, she went around to the side of the house. The camera caught it all, her crouching by the meter box, a small flashlight between her teeth. She was pulling something from her pocket, a folded envelope she tucked behind the gas pipe. By the time I stepped outside, she was gone. I waited until her taillights vanished down the street before I walked over and pulled the envelope free. Inside was a note in her handwriting. I know you've been talking to people. You're confused, but I'm trying to protect the family. Please don't make this worse. No signature, no threat, just control wrapped in concern. I slipped it back into the envelope and sealed it with tape. Evidence, not emotion. The next morning I handed it to Melanie when she came by to collect the camera footage. She read it and shook her head. Classic gaslighting, she said. She's losing grip. She never had one, I said quietly. Melanie looked at me for a long time, then said something I'll never forget. You'd be amazed how many people survive the first betrayal only to fall apart during the justice. Stay steady, Mr. Morgan, the hardest part's coming. When she left, the house felt heavier again, but not from fear, from the gravity of what was already in motion. That evening I wrote in my log, October 14th, APS confirmed hospice bribe attempt. Investigator secured footage. Subject aware of investigation. Risk of escalation, high. Response, calm vigilance. Then I closed the notebook and stared out the window. The harbor lights flickered in the mist, steady as heartbeats. False mercy, I thought. That's what they'd offered me. Mercy that kills, kindness that buries. But mercy isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's the hand that holds the wire steady while the current runs through. And I still had work to do. The summons arrived in a thin white envelope stamped State Licensing Division. No drama, no threat in the language, just a date, a time, and a room number at the county building overlooking the harbor. But I could feel the current shift the moment I opened it. Her brother, the notary, had been called before the board. The hearing was set for the following Thursday. I spent the week in quiet readiness. Every morning I walked the dock just after sunrise, notebook tucked in my jacket pocket. The gulls had grown bolder with the cold. They cried over the water like restless children. I breathed that air in, sharp and briny, and let it wash through the parts of me that still wanted to hate. I wouldn't give them that power. Hate is loud. It shorts the signal. I needed clarity. When the day came, I shaved, pressed my old Navy coat, and took the bus instead of driving. The courthouse steps smelled faintly of rain and oil. Inside, the boardroom buzzed low, a few suits murmuring, papers shuffling. He sat at the far end of the table, younger than I remembered, pale under the fluorescent lights. The state seal gleamed on the wall behind him, and a recorder clicked softly on the desk. Melanie was there too, seated 2 chairs from me. She gave a small nod, eyes steady. Carver leaned against the back wall, silent, his tie slightly loosened. The chairwoman of the board began. Her voice was calm, practiced. "We're here to review the notarial conduct of Mr. Randall E." She stopped herself, glancing at her notes. The respondent in connection with the hospice authorization and financial documents of Mr. Edwin Morgan. The notary's lawyer, a narrow man in an expensive suit, started his defense before she'd finished the sentence. My client acted in good faith under familial instruction. Any signatures he witnessed were presented to him as genuine. There's no evidence of malicious intent. Carver stepped forward. If the board will review Exhibit C, they'll see timestamps from the pharmacy and the corresponding signature logs. They don't align. The notary's journal shows a signing on a day Mr. Morgan was hospitalized. A murmur moved through the room. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Morgan, can you confirm you were in the hospital on that date?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I was in recovery under monitoring. No visitors allowed." "Did you authorize any power of attorney or hospice consent on that date?" "No, ma'am. I couldn't have lifted a pen even if I'd wanted to." Carver handed the next exhibit across, the footage from my kitchen camera. The timestamp glowed in the corner of the screen as my daughter-in-law's figure appeared, placing the envelope behind the gas pipe. Her face, her handwriting, her movement. Unmistakable. The notary's lawyer stood. "Irrelevant," he said. "My client wasn't present in that video." Carver didn't even look at him. "Watch the reflection on the window," he said. "Right here." The camera zoomed slightly, the frame catching a faint shape outside the glass. A tall figure standing near the car, holding what looked like a clipboard. The room went silent. The chairwoman leaned forward. "Mr. Randall, is that you?" The man's mouth opened, then closed. His lawyer whispered something fast, urgent. He swallowed hard. "I was there," he said finally. "But only to witness delivery, not contents." The chairwoman set her pen down. "Your journal shows you notarized a hospice authorization for Mr. Morgan the following morning." He nodded weakly. She looked at him a long time. "And you didn't question why the same individual delivering that envelope was also your sister?" Silence again, thicker this time. "I thought it was family business," he muttered. Carver's voice was quiet when he spoke. "Family business doesn't exempt you from the law." By the end of the session, the board voted unanimously. License suspended pending criminal referral. The sound of the gavel was almost gentle. Outside, the sky had darkened, and rain fell in thin silver threads across the harbor. I stood beneath the overhang, watching people hurry past, all of them unaware that a small, quiet war had just shifted hands. Melanie joined me under the awning. "He folded faster than I expected," she said. "People like that always do," I replied. "They depend on someone else doing the dirty work." She gave me a look, part respect, part worry. "You all right?" "I will be," I said. "Soon." Later that week, Carver filed for the Civil Protective Order. My bank accounts, property, and trust were now shielded under court oversight. I had to appear for testimony again, this time in a more formal setting. The county courtroom, flags on either side, the judge's bench looming like the bow of an old ship. My daughter-in-law sat 2 rows ahead, flanked by her attorney. She didn't turn around, but I could feel her presence like static on a line. When the clerk swore me in, my hand didn't shake. Carver started slow, walking the court through the documentation, forged signatures, pharmacy analysis, hospice forms. I answered every question with the same steady cadence I used when explaining circuits to apprentices decades ago. Facts, sequence, logic. Her lawyer tried to discredit the evidence, claimed I was confused, misremembering, emotionally compromised. He even suggested the pills had been mixed up by accident. I looked him squarely in the eye. I spent 40 years wiring ships where one crossed line could kill a man. I know the difference between accident and intent. The courtroom went still. When the session ended, the judge announced she'd issue a ruling within the week. Her tone was careful, respectful. "Mr. Morgan," she said as I stepped down, "you've conducted yourself with remarkable composure. Whatever the outcome, you've reminded this court what it means to stand firm under pressure." Outside, Carver clapped me on the shoulder. "She's going to rule in your favor," he said quietly. "I can feel it." But I'd stopped chasing comfort. All I wanted now was truth, signed and sealed so I could walk back to the harbor and breathe again. That night I returned home, poured a small glass of whiskey and sat by the window. The rain had passed. The air smelled of wet cedar and sea salt. I thought of my wife again. The quiet strength in her hands, the way she'd hum while sealing envelopes at the kitchen table. "You always check twice," she used to say, "before you trust a seal." I smiled at that. Somewhere inside, I felt the old circuitry settle, humming low, constant, no longer sparking. The fight wasn't over, but the current was flowing the right direction now. It took almost 3 weeks for the next envelope to arrive. The same seal, heavier paper this time. The heading read, "State of Washington, Criminal Division." Charges filed: attempted elder abuse, fraudulent power of attorney, controlled substance tampering, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. I ran my finger across the embossed lettering and let the silence of my living room answer for me. There was no joy in it, no triumph. Only that quiet weight that comes when something broken finally begins to settle into place. My daughter-in-law had crossed the line from deceit to prosecution. And my son. His name wasn't on the charge sheet, but the investigator's note mentioned potential complicity under review. That was harder to read than all the rest. Melanie called the next morning. "You'll be subpoenaed to testify," she said. "The case will move to Superior Court. The prosecutor wants it clean. No emotion, just evidence." "Good," I told her. "The truth doesn't need dramatics." She paused. "They've pled not guilty." I expected that. People like them always think they can talk their way out of gravity. The trial came with winter rain, a steady drizzle that soaked through everything. I took the bus downtown, trench coat buttoned to the collar, my notes sealed inside a manila folder. Carver met me at the steps. His voice was low. "Stay calm. Facts are on our side." Inside, the courtroom was too bright, too polished. It smelled faintly of wax and anxiety. My daughter-in-law sat at the defense table, her hair perfectly in place, face composed, like the kind of calm you practice in the mirror before walking into judgment. Her brother sat beside her, pale, drawn, a man already unraveling inside his suit. The prosecutor, a compact man named Lyle, opened with a single photograph, the sealed pill envelope. "This," he said, "is how control disguises itself as care." From there, he moved like a surgeon. Chain of custody, pharmacy results, notary records, the board's suspension report. Piece by piece, every quiet act she'd hidden behind concern became visible under the light. When my name was called, I took the stand without hesitation. The wood of the railing was cold under my palms. "Mr. Morgan," Lyle said, "would you tell the court what you remember from the night in question?" I looked out at the jury. Strangers, all of them, yet each carrying some small fragment of fairness. Then I spoke. The night I heard her say comfort only, I knew something was wrong. Because I wasn't dying. I was living quietly, and someone decided that was inconvenient. The words didn't come fast. They came measured one after another like the steady hum of a working current. I told them about the pills, the forged DNR, the fake bank signature, how I'd logged every detail, waited, documented, how I'd fought the way an electrician fights a short, not with rage, but with precision. When the defense had their turn, they went for the heart. "Mr. Morgan, do you love your family?" "Yes." "Then how could you believe your daughter-in-law meant to harm you?" I met his eyes. "Belief doesn't cancel proof." He tried to smile. "Could it be a misunderstanding?" I leaned in slightly. "If misunderstanding leaves sedatives in my pills and forged names on my deeds, then we should all be afraid of misunderstanding." That ended his rhythm. Next came the pharmacy testimony. Torres on the stand. Steady voice, clinical detail. Midazolam and zolpidem traces confirmed. Dosage inconsistent with patient's prescription. No emotion, just science. Then Melanie. Calm. Direct. She described the bribe attempt with the hospice nurse, the note left behind my meter box, the reflection in the porch camera showing the notary waiting in the car. Her tone was gentle but unflinching. "This was a pattern," she said. "Coordinated, deliberate, and aimed at control." By the time the prosecutor rested, the silence in the room felt heavy enough to bend the air. The jury took 6 hours. When they returned, she wouldn't look up. Her brother stared straight ahead as if bracing for a wave that had already broken. On the count of attempted elder abuse, guilty. On the count of controlled substance tampering, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit financial exploitation, guilty. The words landed one by one, clean as hammer strikes. The judge didn't raise her voice. "Sentenced to a total of 13 years, no probation, immediate custody." The gavel's crack was sharp enough to echo, and just like that, the current shifted. I sat still as the bailiff led them away. I felt no victory, no rush, just an even calm spreading through my chest, like the hum of power restored after an outage. Outside, the sky had cleared. The harbor below shone with that pale winter light that makes everything honest. Water, metal, memory. Carver walked beside me down the courthouse steps. "You did it, Ed." I shook my head. "No, I just told the truth long enough for someone to hear it." He smiled faintly. "That's harder than it sounds. Not when you've had a lifetime to practice." That night I sat at my desk, the gray notebook open one last time. I stared at the blank page before me, the one I'd saved for this moment, and wrote a single line. Verdict delivered. Justice rendered. Circuits restored. I closed the notebook, set it beside my wife's photograph, and turned off the lamp. The room settled into darkness, soft and still. For the first time in months, the house didn't hum with worry. The wires in the walls sounded steady again, like the sea when the storm finally runs out of wind. And somewhere in that quiet, I understood something simple. The current had never really carried me. I'd been carrying it all along. The days after the trial came slow, like the tide pulling itself back after a storm. The phone stopped ringing. The mail thinned out. Even the wind through the harbor pines seemed quieter, as if the whole world was taking a breath with me. I spent my mornings by the docks again. Same bench, same stretch of gray-blue water that's been here longer than any of us. I'd sit with my thermos of coffee watching the boats drift, ropes creaking against the pylons. There's something honest about that sound. Wood, rope, and water all speaking the same old language. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about repair. For months I'd lived like a man holding a wire barehanded, waiting for the next jolt. But now there was space in me again. Space for air, for silence, for the sound of gulls circling without urgency. The trust had survived the audit. Carver called to tell me the court signed off. The Morgan Maritime Fund was officially recognized as a scholarship trust for veterans' kids. "You're a free man, Edwin," he said over the phone. "Every cent protected, every record cleared." "Good," I told him. "Let's keep it that way." The house felt different now. I'd repainted the kitchen, repaired the old fuse box, replaced the light over the sink that had been flickering for years. Little things. Work that reminded my hands what steady meant. A few people reached out from church, from the Harbor Club. They didn't ask about the case. They just brought food or tools or quiet company. I liked that. I never needed anyone to speak for me. I only needed them to stand near without looking away. One afternoon, Melanie came by. No clipboard this time, just her coat unbuttoned and a look that said she'd come to say goodbye. "The department closed the file," she said, smiling softly. "It's official now. You're the survivor, not the victim." I poured her a cup of coffee. Feels strange hearing that out loud. She nodded. "Most people don't understand what surviving really looks like. It's not loud, it's this." She gestured around the quiet room. "Just you, the light, and the truth still standing." We sat in silence for a while, letting the warmth fill the small space between us. When she left, she pressed a folded card into my hand. It was a simple note. "If you ever need to talk, not about the case, but about what came after, call me." After she drove off, I stood at the window for a long time. The evening light caught the edge of the water outside, turning it silver. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like something enduring. A beam that had taken lightning and stayed upright. That weekend, I got a call from my son. His voice was thin, careful. "Dad, I heard the sentence." "I know. I don't know what to say." "Then don't," I said quietly. "Not yet." He exhaled. "She said she was trying to protect us. That's what she told me." "She was protecting something," I said. "But it wasn't us." A long pause, then softer. "I didn't know how bad it was." "I believe you," I said. "But belief doesn't undo what's done." Silence again, the kind that hurts a little to sit through. Finally he said, "I'm going to move. Start over somewhere else." "That's wise," I said. "And take the time to learn the difference between helping and controlling. It's a thin wire, but it carries a heavy current." He didn't answer, but I heard the catch in his breath. Then the line went quiet. After he hung up, I walked down to the dock behind the house. The night air was cool and clean. The stars were faint, but they were there. Steady points, patient as truth. I untied my small skiff, the one I hadn't used in months, and pushed off into the Sound. The oars dipped into the water with that old rhythm my arms still remembered. A seal surfaced once, curious, then slipped away without a sound. I drifted out far enough that the house became a shape, a shadow against the trees, and I let myself breathe. Really breathe. For the first time since all this began. Out there, with only the water around me, the world made sense again. The sea doesn't forgive, but it doesn't lie either. It keeps what it keeps. It lets go of what it must. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small gray notebook, the one that had carried every line of this battle. I flipped through its pages, all those careful dates, names, small victories written in block letters. At the very back was that final line I'd written after the verdict. Verdict delivered, justice rendered, circuits restored. I tore out that page, folded it once, and held it over the water. "Thank you," I whispered, not to anyone in particular, just to the air, to the current, to the quiet that had held me up. Then I let the paper go. It drifted a moment, caught the moonlight, then sank slowly beneath the surface. Gone. When I rowed back, the dock lights were glowing soft and golden. Home looked smaller somehow, but warmer. Inside, I hung my coat, washed my hands, and sat down at the kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the old clock, the smell of sea salt, all of it folded together like the ending of a long, patient song. I realized something then. Justice isn't loud, it doesn't arrive with applause. It's the quiet that comes when you've told the truth enough times that it finally starts to hold. And as I sat there, the old house breathing around me, I whispered a small promise into the silence. "I'll keep the current steady, love, for as long as these hands can work." Outside, the tide came in. The water rose against the piling, soft and sure, as if it was answering. What the water keeps, it keeps forever. If this story reached you, take a moment before you go. Hit the like button if you felt something along the way. And tell me in the comments, what part of Edwin's journey stayed with you most?